My name is Ruth Barron, and I'm a National Career Strategist at the College of Law. And this webinar is on lawyers with a side gig. Before we start this webinar, I recognise that many of us are joining today and watching the recording later on different lands of different traditional custodians. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I live, learn and work, the Gadigal and Wongal. I acknowledge that the presence and cultures of all of our First Peoples are vital to this nation that we share, Australia, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. Now, we have a few guidelines for our webinar today. If you'd like to submit your questions, do so via the Q&A function. You can find it at the bottom of your screen. The session is being recorded and we'll share that with participants afterwards. If you happen to lose connection, you can log back in again using the same meeting details provided. And I will put a link at the end for a quick survey. Please take the time to complete it and any ideas you might have for other webinars. So now I would like to introduce our creative lawyers for today's program. Please welcome Greg Duffy, a partner at Frankel Lawyers and a film producer. Hi, Greg. I saw you wave there.
Yes,
and
hi,
Chelsea. Hi, Greg. We've also got Chelsea Donoghue, a lawyer at Frankel Lawyers, as well as a vocalist and a vocal and artist development coach. So, Greg and Chelsea, can I ask you to introduce yourself? I might get Chelsea to do so first.
Sure. Thanks, Ruth, and thanks for having me. So my name is Chelsea and I'm a solicitor at Frankel Lawyers. I practice predominantly in music and entertainment law. And I'm also a vocalist and work with artists when I'm not in the law firm doing my lawyer duties. So I've toured for many years with other artists and I teach singing. I still do gigs myself on weekends and lots of music-related things, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about more as we go through. So I'll pass it on to you now, Greg.
Thanks, Chelsea, and thanks for having us. My name's Greg, and I'm a partner at Frankel Lawyers, which is an intellectual property and entertainment law firm out of Sydney. And I've been doing that for about 30 years, as well as working in the film and television sector. I mean, in terms of our legal work, we go right across the entertainment industry and intellectual property and new media, et cetera, et cetera. But my particular creative interest is in film and television, and I've produced a few films and short films as well.
Fantastic. So first, a very important question for you, Greg. Mm-hmm. Is it a side gig or a side hustle?
Well, this was the debate that we had with Ruth and Chelsea, and originally it was a side hustle. I think I'm just too old school, I'm probably a little bit out of date. But, hustle to me always has the edge of something a little bit dodgy as well, And I didn't want anyone to think that we were doing something dodgy on the side. So gigs a little bit more straight down the line as far as I'm concerned.
Well, how do you look at it, Chelsea? Do you mind if it's called a side hustle?
I'm a bit more flexible. I don't mind. People often say that about me as well. Oh, she's hustling, she's doing this, she's doing that. And I think that terminology is used quite often in the creative space. And I think it probably also comes from the fact that it's not really easy to have a profitable income stream from the arts as well. So you do have to kind of hustle and work hard for it. And so I understand it for that nature. But at the same time, gig is very relevant because gig also has a creative connotation attached to it. And Greg and I, that both applies very well, I think, in terms of the film gigs and music gigs. So either or is good for me.
Yeah. Sounds good, Chelsea. So why do you have a side gig then?
Why do I have a side gig? I mean, my music business and involvement in music has always been my first job, to be honest. So before I became a lawyer, while I was studying, and even before that, I had a business in music. And so the law thing kind of became a side gig for me for a while I was studying. And I used to, I wasn't the greatest student. I used to miss a lot of my classes because I was touring and I'd fly back for my exams, but I'd kind of made it work. And then when I was admitted as a lawyer and after finishing my training at the College of Law, law then became my first gig, and music got pushed to the side a little bit. But it doesn't feel like work for me. I've always loved being involved in music and working with musicians and with artists. It doesn't feel like it's hard work. It's just something I'm passionate about and I really enjoy doing. So I've made it work, and I've made it still fit into my busy lifestyle. And I guess that's why I'm here today, to have a chat about it.
Thanks, Chelsea. What about you, Greg? Why do you have a side gig?
Yeah, look, similar to Chelsea, I came from a production background, so I've been working in film and TV, and then had basically been working on both sides of the camera, and then worked with a lawyer in Perth who was doing the legal work on a particular television production I was working on. And I just happened on the set to say to him, "What are you doing?" And chatted about it. And he said, "Oh, come and see me," So I went and chatted with him later on. And it occurred to me that lots of the people that I was working with creatively had no idea of the business and financing and legal side of the film and television industry. And so I just thought, well, okay, I'm going to stay interested in that. And so when I went to uni years ago, it used to be the case that you had to do the first year of another degree before you could apply to law. And so I'd done an first year of arts. And then at the end of it, went and did a summer clerkship with this lawyer at Perth. And he said, "Why don't you apply to law and see how it goes?" So then, a bit like Chelsea, I sort of segued into law then and kept the production stuff going. But as the law became more consuming in terms of time, I then moved to Sydney because over here at the time, the only sort of intellectual property and communications and media course was here at the University of New South Wales. And so I wanted to focus on all of that. So I sort of just focused my whole law degree on intellectual property and media and communications. At the same time, I had friends of mine who were at the film school and wanted people to come and work on their films for free. So, I'd go and be an assistant director or production manager or whatever on their films for afters and their short films for various festivals and stuff like that, and just kept my hand in. And then when I finished studying, chased down kind of Michael Frankel, because he was the key person in film and TV, and still is really, in this country, and just hassled him until he gave me a job. And then, spent a few years just focusing on the law and making sure that, I got really across all of that and just kept the film stuff going in the background. And then, like Chelsea said, now it's a juggle between the two. You got to sort of balance the two.
It sounds like you have quite a lot of fun with your side gig, both of you, but has it helped you become a better lawyer? I'll go to you, Greg.
Yeah, well, in my area, definitely, because, and I'm sure Chelsea's the same, because the film, television and media area is so specific in its terms of art and the sort of things that are relevant to the clients, the artists, the writers, the directors, the producers, etc., etc. If you know the industry from their point of view, then you can speak their language and you can solve their problems a lot faster. And if you know what they're talking about when they say that the best boy's fallen over and the grip's broken and what do we do, then you can actually give them some quick solutions and you can help solve their problems. So yeah, it certainly helps.
In some ways, does it give you credibility, do you think, then?
Yeah, I think the law is its own specific beast, and you've got to be on top of that. You've got to understand the law, and you've got to understand how the practice of the law. But it's the transition between the two and the melding of the two that you can speak the language of your clients really quickly, and you can understand what their problems are, and get to a solution more quickly.
Yeah, Chelsea, do you find the same thing, that you can speak the language or that it gives you credibility in your industry?
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think, I'm still learning. I'm a junior lawyer myself, but I find that the best lawyers are the people who can explain complex problems to people who are not lawyers simply and clearly. I think that's what it is. If we speak in legalese all the time, we're not really communicating with our clients properly. The goal is for our clients to understand. So there's a second layer in that it's industry specific in music and film, but I think also generally just having that skill of being able to understand your clients' wants, their needs, where they're at, and being able to communicate with them and get straight to the point, so that there's no fluffing around and grey areas.
Yeah. In some ways, so you're both working in entertainment law or media law, and your side gigs are in music or media or film. Do you think you have to be in a similar area of law to your side gig for it to be relevant? Do you think it can be that you could have a side gig in another area, for example? I'll ask you, Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, and I'm sure for Greg as well, it's very useful for my side gig to be music when I'm predominantly working with music clients. But I think, and I've always been a believer of this, any sort of creative outlet, and it's not just for being a lawyer, for any profession, and it's probably more relevant the more intensive your job is, having that creative outlet is really important, just for balance and to use different parts of your brain and to be inquisitive. And I think it helps so many areas. And for some reason, I'm less tired the busier I am. If I have some sort of, gig after work or some other thing I have to attend to, my brain just keeps going, and I'm more efficient. And I think I do a better job. It's when I'm a bit more lethargic and I'm not, I don't have as much on, I'm not as productive. I'm not sure if that's the same for you, Greg. That might just be a me thing, but I have always noticed that. So I think for that reason, it's important to have just something else separate from work, just to keep everything active and running in your brain.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's both sides of the brain, because law is as a profession and as a practice is quite reductive, in its analytical skills, which is fantastic because that's what you have to be. We have to be details people, and we have to, get right down to the details. But if you've got a creative gig, whatever it is, and I've got friends in the law who go home and build sheds, and that's just as creative. They design them, they build them, and they're for their kids or their friends or whatever. And it's just another side of your brain that is, as you say, Chelsea, is exercising it and giving you balance and also firing you up in terms of motivation. So, the thing people say to me, what's the best part of filmmaking? It must be on set and all that kind of stuff. And I say, you know what? The most fun is actually sitting with a blank piece of paper and a writer and a director and going, okay, what do we want to say? What do we want to write about? And so that's just straight from the blank. Now, that's often how you feel when a client contacts you and says, I've got this problem. You're basically a blank page. So you've got to be able to exercise those sides of your brain, to be able to solve that problem or both problems really and write something.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just also pointing out to the participants on the webinar, you can put your questions, if you have any, for Chelsea and Greg into the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. We'll have some time at the end to ask some of those questions, so feel free to put in questions if you have any. But just on that note, that idea that it uses both sides of your brain and perhaps also bringing in creativity in a different way. Do you feel maybe that a side gig has helped you enjoy law more?
Yeah, I think so. I think it has. I mean, for me, it does cross over a lot. So the skills that I've developed in music and performing and working with artists do cross over to my work here at Donoghue Lawyers quite a bit. So yes from me. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, same thing. It the two just go hand in hand. Certainly in my area. I mean, I'm working sort of broadly across all intellectual property, but generally the area of film and TV is kind of probably 70 to 80% of my work. And so, the fact that I'm working in that area as well keeps me relevant, keeps me up to date, and also, allows me to sort of see what the problems are. So, for instance, most recently the strikes in Hollywood, the writers and the actors strikes, as soon as that happened, every producer that was in production that I was working for at the time rang and said, "What's going on? Oh, we've got to stop production. You know, it's all falling apart. You know, the world's caving in, da da da." And you know, immediately my producer brain was, "Oh my God, you're right. This is terrible. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a day." And then immediately my lawyer brain kicks in and goes, "Well, hang on a minute. What's the law on this?" Well, the law is that that's all happening in the States, and unless you've got SAG actors or WGA writers on your production here in Australia, and it's an agreement that's done under those particular award agreements, then it's irrelevant. You know, so the two things go hand in hand, really.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting through some questions as well into the Q&A, which is great. I'll be going to those after we've asked a few more of these ones first. So you've kind of touched on this, both of you, a little bit, in the fact that being busy, I think, actually might make you more productive. But how do you find the time to do law and pursue your side gig at the same time? And for both of you, you know, you've got quite intensive sort of side gigs here in terms of time.
For sure. I mean, I feel I'm in a very fortunate position because my boss is quite flexible with me, and he's a musician himself as well. So he is all about me jumping at any other opportunities that come my way in terms of music. But at the same time, it is a balancing act, and it is difficult at times. Sometimes it's really challenging because we have deadlines, and in this field of work, sometimes things can't wait. You can't just push something to the next day. It has to be done. So every now and then there's late nights, there's early mornings, and there's a bit of compromise that happens sometimes. I'm also at the point where I acknowledge if there's two things happening, my law work is the most important thing that I have to dedicate my time to first. But most of the time I am able to juggle things pretty well. And I've always been pretty flexible and gentle on myself as well. So I think if you have high expectations, then that can cause a lot of stress, and you just get nowhere because you kind of panic and get worried about things, and then it doesn't happen. So I think being gentle on yourself and time management is important as well. But yeah, as I said before, it's when I have music things happening, it kind of it helps me get through my law work, not necessarily faster, but more efficiently, and I have more drive or something. So, and I look forward to it. If I know that I have a gig at the end of the day, it kind of pumps me up, and I get through it, and it's an incentive that way as well.
Thanks, Chelsea. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, that's true. Look, it is a balancing act, and it is difficult because, as Chelsea said, you know, sometimes in the law there's just time critical things, and obviously in litigation, and we do a bit of litigation, you know, the courts don't wait for you to come back from, you know, making a film or going to a music gig or whatever. So you've got to do those sort of balances. So consequently, I find I do a lot of my film type work late at night, at night basically, and it sort of helps a bit because a lot of the people I'm dealing with are international, so in the US or the UK or Europe, and so the time difference actually works for them. You know, they're getting up when I'm sort of settling in for the evening, and so that kind of works. And it also, I find, collaboration. So it depends, obviously, in the music industry, whether you're, you know, doing things solo or in a band or with a group of people or whatever. But certainly in the film and television industry, everything's a collaboration. And so I just been very good at delegating, and so joining together to work with the right people, so people I want to work with, and I've always worked with the same people really, and then just delegating, and you know, we all do different things at different times, and I'm pretty good at working at night, whereas some other of my collaborators are better during the day, so they do that stuff, and then I do the night stuff, and yeah, it's just a balancing act, you know.
I'm going to jump into some of the questions, and this kind of leads on a little bit from this, what we're talking about in some ways in terms of finding time to do your side gig, which is, what does a day look like for you as a lawyer, for both of you, in your field? We haven't really touched on, you know, what a typical day would look like. So Chelsea, I'll go to you first. What would it look like in your day job?
Sure.
Yeah.
Since we've got a bit more daylight in the days, I've been trying to get up early before work to go for a walk or get some exercise in and get a coffee. because for me, that doesn't happen at the end of the day because I'm just physically a bit drained. So I've been trying to do that. And then when I get to work, often it starts by having a chat with my boss, Darren, to talk about what's on the agenda, what needs to be done, put a list in place of what I need to get done in that day. I have a lot of matters running at the same time, so it's about prioritizing and putting a clear plan of attack in for the day. And then I also take a lot of new client inquiries with music matters. So it's a mix of working on existing matters and dealing with new clients, collaborating with some of the other lawyers here at Donoghue Lawyers, depending on what the matter is. I'll have a lunch break. Sometimes I'll be on the phone with an artist I'm looking after at the moment, or I'll be attending to emails, arranging studio sessions or rehearsals or things like that. And then at the end of the day, I am either teaching or I have rehearsals or I have meetings with some of the artists I'm working with. But every day of the week, I'll have something on after work. And then sometimes I have a free day on a weekend. It doesn't happen much at the moment, but so weekends are kind of the time where I put my law stuff to the side completely, and I'll monitor emails, and if there's anything urgent, I'll deal with it. But normally I completely put that to the side and I just focus on my music stuff and spend time with my family and friends and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sounds like a busy life, Chelsea. And Greg, how about you? What does a day-to-day look like for you in the law?
Look, similarly busy, slightly different. I got to get kids to school in the morning, so that's always sort of the juggle of getting them out of the house and off to school. And then I'm fortunate enough to live within about 25 minutes of where I work, so I ride my bike in, and that generally kind of clears the brain and gets me awake. For one thing, and gets me started. And then as soon as I get in a bit like Chelsea, I have a chat with all the staff and work out what the priorities are for the day and who's doing what and what's on and deadlines and all that sort of stuff. And then just launch into the work. There's always plenty of things to do. And obviously anything that's time sensitive, you just dive into that and get that going. And then I always try to have a swim at lunchtime. I just because our job is so sedentary, we're either sitting or standing. I mean, I got a sitting, standing desk and whatever, but it's still sedentary. So I just try to go out and go to a local pool and, have a swim at lunchtime and just kind of clear my head and body out. And then, working afternoon, just keep everything juggling along. And if there's anything that's urgent on the film side, like sometimes you get inquiries from funders or distributors or sales agents or whatever, and you just got to jump on them straight away. So I'll sort of be juggling that as well as doing the other work. And then afternoon is kids' sport, training and all that sort of stuff. And in summer, trying to get to the beach as much as we can. And then after dinner, it's settle into all the film stuff. So once the family's kind of settled and doing whatever they're doing, I just open the laptop and there'll usually be a string of emails and stuff to do and just start working my way through those and just sort of do that through till when it's done.
Yeah,
Greg, can I ask you, sorry, do you mind if I've got a question for you, Greg. Do you get much time to watch films yourself or have some Netflix time?
Yeah, well, look, funnily enough, I'm old school. I'm a cinema person. I still like going and sitting in a cinema. And luckily, I live around the corner from one of the best cinemas in Australia, which is called the Randwick Ritz, which is a beautiful old Art Deco cinema. Been taken over by a cinema operator out of Melbourne, great guy who just knows how to program great shows. So it's walking distance. So I try to get there every weekend if there's something on. And if I miss something, then I'll watch it, on TV. But I prefer to see it at the big screen.
Lovely, that's great.
Hey, can I ask you, Duffy, do you get to go and see other people's music?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get out to gigs as much as I can, for sure. But the reason why I asked you that is because I feel like a lot of other people my age or in my area are watching all these new shows that are coming out on Netflix. And that's one thing that I don't really do. I'd like to, but we have a similar routine. It's instead of getting home and catching up on different shows, that's when we're going into our creative mode and attending to those types of things. But no, in terms of going to gigs, I try to get to as many as I can.
Yeah,
for sure.
I just wanted to say we've been getting some comments in the Q&A saying you guys are both amazing, which is fantastic. And we've also had amazing, such a busy day, but also well planned with added flexibility. We do have some more questions here, and I'd love to get to at least some of them if we can try and be quick, so that we can try and get quite a few through a few of these. One of this is about negativity. So have either of you, as your work as a lawyer or in your side gig, had that negatively impact on opportunities or reputation, or has it always been positive? I guess, but juggling the two of them.
I mean, for me, I definitely had missed opportunities, certain touring opportunities or gigs that I've had to turn down because of work commitments. So yes, that's a negative.
Yeah, I'm probably the same. If there's been productions or projects that, you know, had I have not been working, you know, so hard in the law, then perhaps I could have focused on those. But generally, I try to stay positive about all this stuff, because, you know, if you're worried about the opportunities you've missed in life, then you're spending too much time looking in the rearview mirror. You know, just keep looking forward, I say, and the things that are in front of you that you want to do, you want to say, you want to impact, people you want to work with, and just focus on those, and don't worry about the missed, you know, opportunities.
I also feel as well, sometimes, I mean, my personality and whole vibe in a creative space is different to how I am in a meeting about a legal matter. And sometimes I feel it's a little bit hard to merge the two with people who I'm used to playing in a band with, for example, to then getting into a serious chat about the law.
Yes.
So sometimes there are those kind of personality things that you have to be a little bit, you just have to think about it a little bit. But I mean, I haven't had a negative experience per se. It's just every now and then it can be a bit awkward.
Yeah, I've got friends who I work in production with, and they say, "Oh, Greg, you dropped into your law voice. Can you just sort of back it off a little bit?" And sometimes you get a little bit too serious about, you know, a particular problem, and it's quite analytical. They call it my law voice. Can you just, you know, bring it back a bit?
We've got so many questions coming through, which I think is a testament to the both of you, people coming through with lots and lots of questions. One of the questions is whether having a side gig and balancing law can feel overwhelming at all. How do you overcome the stress or the schedule clashes?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly felt very stressed, and at times I've just been like, I've got too much on my plate. Why do I keep saying yes to everything? But I think it's really important to just check in with yourself and realize you're just a human being. And if you need to take some time out, do it. If it's overwhelming and it's too much, you just need to pause sometimes and just take a moment to breathe, because it can be a lot.
Yeah,
it can be overwhelming.
Look, that's absolutely correct, Chelsea. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask. You know, like, ask your colleagues, ask your friends, ask your family, ask the other people, collaborators that you work with. Just say, look, you know, I'm flat out doing this, and this at the moment. Can you help me with, you know, these things? And just be constant communicating. I mean, it's a huge problem in the law, particularly, and to a lesser extent in the well, I don't know, actually, it's probably the same, but I certainly see it with burnout in the law, where people just take on as much, and they think they've got to internalize it, and they've got to solve every problem, and they've got to do it all themselves, and they can't say no to anything, and it's a really dangerous frame of mind. It's fine to take on as much as you can do, and to, you know, want to help people. That's fantastic. That's why we're doing law. But you've got to bring in, you know, your colleagues and your friends and people that you know, can help you out. And if it's just simply that you can't do that amount of work, then don't be afraid to refer people out. I mean, we refer people out all the time when we just can't get to. We don't want to let them down, so we, you know, refer people out. Yeah,
that's a great point.
I guess in relation to that too, and I think, Chelsea, you were saying, well, actually both you and Greg were saying that you studied law part-time and did your side gig part-time, and this question is whether that's actually an option. Like, can you do both? Can you study part-time and do your gig part-time?
Yeah, look, I mean, you can, of course you can. But again, it's about managing expectations. I was in a group at uni with some very high achieving girls, you know, who would get HDs in everything. And I would be a bit frustrated sometimes because I wasn't quite at their level and I wasn't dedicating the same amount of time. But I thought to myself, what do I actually want to achieve? And what do I want to get out of this degree? And I came to the conclusion that I would rather have that industry experience and be involved in music, and for my marks to suffer a little bit. I didn't do terribly, but you know, I wasn't a straight HD student, but I would prefer that than give up my music completely. So I made that compromise for myself. That won't work for everyone. It's really up to you and what you want. For me, being a music lawyer, that was the right decision. And my boss says all the time, marks don't really matter. Who cares? It's about what you know. It's about your work ethic, all of these other things. And for me, having that industry experience really helped me becoming a music lawyer.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think I agree with Chelsea, there's lots of different ways you can do it these days. The old days of just sort of throwing yourself into a full-time degree and dropping everything else and just doing that. You know, you can do that if you've got the sort of support around you. I mean, it's pretty hard to be a full-time student in Sydney, Melbourne, and the capital cities these days to be able to afford to not be working or have some support around you. So part-time is relevant, and then if you can keep going with the side gig as well, then use it as a motivation and a balance in your life. When I did it over here, I was studying full-time, but I was also working. And so, yeah, that was just the focus of it. That's all I did basically for the few years. And then once I got out and focused on the law, because I think, I agree with Chelsea that marks that you get at law school just get you, out of law school and across the line to get a job, whatever. It's really what you do after law school in terms of how much you take on board and learn how to become a really good lawyer first, and then that's the great skill, and that's the great benefit is once you're a really good lawyer, then all of your industry knowledge and all of your connections and all of your understanding and your language and that just comes to the fore after that. So however you can juggle it is good for whatever your personal circumstances are. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
I think we've got room maybe for one more question or a couple more questions. In terms of work-life balance, do you think there are any specific law roles, so legal counsel, litigation, or sectors of the law that allow for a bit of a balance, so thinking IP or tax, that allow for that sort of flexible working that so you can pursue your passion on the side? We've touched on this a little bit about, I think, the fact that both of you are in similar sort of areas of law, but maybe there are other areas too that could make it easier to pursue a passion.
I think it also depends what kind of law firm you want to work at. I mean, some of my friends who are in top tier firms, they finish work at 11 p.m. most nights. So, that's just, and it's not necessarily the area of law they're practicing, it's the nature of their law firm. I still work normal hours, till 5:30, 6:30, but I wouldn't say it's because of the fact that I do intellectual property law. I still work the same hours as the commercial litigation team here. I don't know. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, look, it's difficult. I think have done a lot of litigation over the years, and that's the time at which I found it hardest to do my creative work, just simply because of the amount of time pressure and the volume of work you have to produce in a short period of time for litigation. So I found if you're involved in litigation on a daily basis, then it's hard to get your other gig going as such, or keep it going. I find that people who work in either small firms like Chelsea and I do, it's a bit more flexible, and you can sort of work, move work around, share work around, and that sort of thing. And then I have some friends who also work in-house, so in-house in production companies and music publishers and record companies and television companies and and video on demand companies and those sort of things. And even though they still have a pretty large workload, they can still keep some of their own personal creative projects going on the side as well. But to follow on Chelsea's point, I don't have any friends in large law firms who've got any time to do any side creative gigs. They have trouble just remembering the names of their kids and their wife and their with the amount of work they do. And good luck to them. And it's just not my thing.
Yeah, it's not for me either. Yeah.
We've got so many questions that people have asked. So I think I'm going to put my email address into the chat so people can send me an email if they want me to ask Greg and Chelsea questions later. So I will be doing that. But while I do that, I'd love the two of you to let me know your top 2 or maybe 3 tips or pieces of advice for anyone creative who is trying to balance law and a side gig. So I'll go with you first, Greg.
All right. Well, I've said this a couple of times, but it's the thing that was really reinforced to me when I came out of law school and started working with Michael Frankel. He said, the most important thing, you've got all this industry knowledge, which is fantastic, and you know all these people in the industry, you've got all this experience, which is really good. He said, but ultimately the most important thing is to become a good lawyer first. So spend the time to learn the law and learn the practice of the law and to work out how to solve people's problems, legal problems, because that's the first and foremost most important thing. And the second thing, it seems sort of pretty obvious, which is that you've just got to make time for the creative pursuit, even if you are flat out and you feel like you're overwhelmed at work with law and all that sort of stuff. Just even 1 hour, whatever your pursuit is, that whether it's painting or writing or whatever, just put 1 hour a day at minimum just to do that and to stop everything else and just focus on that, because it's like a brain dump. You just completely shed all of the other stuff that's creating stress and difficulty for you, and it just becomes something that keeps the creative side of your brain going. And the third and last thing is really make heaps of time for your family and friends, because there's no point being a great lawyer and a brilliant creative if you haven't got any family and friends and they think you're a dickhead. So you might as well spend time making sure that those relationships are really strong as well, because they all come back and feed into your creativity and feed into your ability to be a good lawyer and a good person.
And what about you, Chelsea? What would be your top few tips?
That was so great, Greg. I loved everything you just said. And mine will probably cross over a little bit. But what you said, Greg, time, that's probably the trickiest thing to actually achieve in practice. And one way I often look at it is, if you think about how much time you spend on your phone or on social media, and we even have ways that we can check how long we're spending on social media, try just for one day halving that time and doing something creative instead. So just putting your phone aside and trying something new. That would be another tip of mine. Just try something new, push yourself out of your comfort zone. For example, I've started learning bass guitar. I'm terrible, but I'm just trying it, and it's something new and it's exciting. And I feel like when you get that spark of trying something new and you realize that you can do it, that incentivizes you to keep going and to keep exploring and playing around with creative things. And then lastly, I think collaborating is fantastic. If you want to have more of a side gig, or if you want to expand your creativity, working with other people is probably the best thing to do. So just reaching out to someone saying, hey, do you want to write a song together? Or, hey, what about this new idea we've got for, whatever it is, just working with people, because they also hold you accountable as well. So if you fall into the position of saying, I don't have time, I can't do it, whatever, if you've got someone else saying, hey, we said that we're going to catch up Wednesday after work to do this thing, then it kind of pushes you to do it. So I think collaborating is really good as well.
Absolutely.
Great tips from both of you, and really appreciate your time today. So thank you, Greg and Chelsea, and to each and every one of you for joining us today on this webinar. I hope you found it useful and you can apply the tips and insights to aid your journey in practice. A really big thank you to Greg Duffy and Chelsea Donoghue. It's been really interesting listening to your answers to these questions. But if you do have any questions for the participants, please reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I've put my email into the chat as well. For those questions that we've had that haven't been answered live today, I will try and see if I can grab those and your email addresses and send you answers. Reach out to Greg and Chelsea and see if they can maybe give us some offline answers for those. You can also follow us, follow the college on socials. And if you haven't already, and you are a PLT student or graduate, you can join us on College Connect, the alumni community, to keep up with upcoming webinars. I have posted a link to a survey if you want to fill that in to provide any feedback on what we could do in the future. And we will also send you a recording via email. So have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks, Ruth.
Bye.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Thanks, Ruth.